The Tunnel to Towers Foundation honors the sacrifices of America's heroes. Heroes like U.S. Army Specialist Andy Keith Kingsley. Andy was part of the 82nd Airborne Division. He received various awards and decorations, including a Purple Heart. While deployed, Andy was catastrophically injured in combat. Andy and his family received a mortgage-free smart home from Tunnel to Towers. But many more heroes, like Andy, need your support. Donate $11 a month and amplify your impact by donating your car or land. Go to T2T.org.
He's at war with woke.
Joe Concha
thinks liberals are a joke.
Joe Concha.
This is the Joe Concha Show, weekday edition, sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Here's Joe Concha.
All right, everybody, on a Thursday night, Kristi Noem, the former South Dakota congresswoman and obviously governor who has led President Trump's Department of Homeland Security in his second term. She was ousted from her position today. Look, I go two ways on this. I look at the record of Noem, but is it the record of Noem? In other words, Department of Homeland Security, when you look at the southern border, is it more secure? Oh, God, it's never been more secure in its, in its existence, quite frankly. Is that because of Noem or because of Trump? In other words, could you put anybody in that position and you would have that on your resume? Yeah, probably. And quite frankly, in terms of media appearances, especially after the Alex Preddy shooting, remember that in Minneapolis? Guy, he obviously is armed, but at the same time, he kicks in a couple of headlights for a ICE vehicle. He has been a provocateur for many, many weeks in Minneapolis. And eventually he confronts ICE once again armed, and he gets shot to death. The way I looked at it was, well, if you come in with a gun, he didn't brandish the gun. Noem said he brandished a gun at one point. That didn't happen. But at the same time, though, these guys are constantly being targeted. Well, what do if you're ICE in that situation? Well, if it's a threat, you take that person out. Now, all of that said, Noem has been unsteady as far as her tenure within the DHS as its head for the past 13 months. So Markwayne Mullin will take over instead, which I think Markwayne Mullin, when you watch this guy on Fox News, on CNN, wherever, he is as cool as a cucumber, all right, and as serious as a tax audit. Markwayne Mullin is the guy you want in this position because, again, I think Noem supported Trump all through 2021 when many people left him. This was a classic case of Trump rewarding somebody for loyalty. But was she the best person for the job? Probably not. Probably not. So here we are. And here is Markwayne Mullin, cut number 18, Elias, talking about being the new DHS head. And this guy, again, does not play games. Cut number 18, go.
But what was your first reaction to just the news that you were nominated for this position, just amidst everything that's happening?
Humbling, because I had to call my dad, and because it happened quick, right? I had to call my wife and call my dad both. And it's just, pretty humbling when you start thinking about it. A little kid from Westville, Oklahoma, gets to serve in the president's cabinet. That's pretty neat.
Now, this is a former MMA fighter. So if you're looking for a guy to run the Department of Homeland Security, boy, think you found him. Dana White, not available. So here we go. Markwayne Mullin, excellent in interviews, by the way. No matter where he is, the guy comes prepared, and more importantly, he is a man of principle. So here we go. Meanwhile, Chuck Schumer reacts to the Kristi Noem firing. Now you'd say, all right, well, you've been calling for Noem to be removed, so therefore you're going to fund DHS, right, Chuck? Oh, no, not going to happen. Cut number 17, go.
The president has fired Kristi Noem. Good riddance. But the problems at this agency, at ICE, transcend any one person. The rot is deep. The president has to end the violence and rein in ICE.
Okay. So that's where this is going to go. In other words, no funding for DHS during a war, mind you, with Iran. You might want the Department of Homeland Security actually, funded during a war, but Democrats do what they can do in the effort of actually making sure they retain power. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with securing the country. It has nothing to do with anything. It's about their own power and their own perseverance. That's it. Nothing more. Speaking of people like this, Gavin Newsom, he was asked, all right, of course he sits down with Katie Couric. Now, you're like, Katie Couric, wow. Is she back on, the Today Show on NBC? No. Oh, is she on CBS? She was the anchor there at one point for the evening news. No. Oh, ABC? Is she back on? No. She does a podcast from her kitchen, like so many ex-hacks that have been ostracized from their industry for various reasons. But here we are. I can't get over this question. I really can't. This is Katie Couric asking Gavin Newsom, do you have a Zoolander problem? Now, have you seen the movie Zoolander with Ben Stiller? It's about a model, right, who is impossibly dumb, but I guess in the eyes of the modeling industry is really, really good looking. So Katie asked Gavin, wow, you're so good looking. How do you get over that? Because that may be a problem when you want to run for president, when people think more about your looks than your brain. I can't get over this, but anyway, go listen to it. Cut number 11, go.
Do you have a Zoolander problem?
No, I do. Jesus. Yeah, Zoolander.
Are you just ridiculously good looking, as Vogue said?
Hardly.
No, seriously, what do you do about that?
You don't do anything about it, because if you're going to do something about it, then you're bull people. You know what? I am who I am. And it's fine. You don't have to like me. Or maybe you like a slick person. I don't know. Whatever. It's okay.
Oh. Maybe you like a slick person. I don't know. I don't even know how to really respond to that. I got to be honest with you. You're so good looking. How do you deal with that? Well, that's journalism today. Anyway, here's also Gavin Newsom being asked on a different podcast, because this guy does not work. How many homes have been rebuilt in the Palisades? It doesn't matter to Gavin Newsom. Oh, do we actually have water in the fire hydrants and the reservoirs? Of course not. Good. Instead, this guy just does interview after interview over and over again on different podcasts, because I guess he wants to be out there because he really, really wants to be president. Anyway, here he is with Pod Save America, a bunch of former Obama speechwriters talking about, hey, do you think that America should halt U.S. military aid to Israel now? And this is what this clown says. Cut number 7, go.
Do you think, looking down the road, that the United States should consider maybe, rethinking our military support for Israel?
It breaks my heart because the current leadership in Israel is walking us down that path, where I don't think you have a choice but that consideration.
Really? So now, during a war with Iran, the guy who wants to be president of the United States and commander-in-chief now says, maybe we should consider just cutting off all military aid to Israel. Oh, it's Gavin meets AOC meets Mamdani. Now, why is this happening? As I said on Fox News earlier, he wants to be president more than anything in the world. And to do that, the way you win a Democratic primary is to go far to the left. Way, way far. Bring in all those people that are really jacked up. Convince them that you are with them. like AOC, like Buttigieg, like whoever you're running against. Kamala will say whatever it takes. But here's how this is going to work, and this is amazing. So Newsom will say this now, and then when he gets to the general, say, I reconsider this. I've evolved, and now I think that we should aid Israel. He'll become a centrist again. So go far left, then go in and become the centrist, and then actually when you get into office, if you win, like Spamberger in Virginia, like Mikey Sherrill in my horrible state of New Jersey, then go back to the left again. Shape shifting. That is the goal. That's Gavin Newsom's goal. Anyway, let's play one more clip before we go to break. Here is Gavin Newsom being asked, well, can you define in any way, shape, or form what your worldview is? In other words, if you have one common objective, if you get into power, what is it? And this is Gavin Newsom's answer, and this is just pitch perfect phony. Cut number 10, go.
What is your defined political project? Like what throughout your career and like that. Right now? Like what is the thing you want to accomplish like politically?
I don't have like a brand. I don't have a tag, "Make America Great," or I don't, the Great Society, or something like Medicare for all the billionaires. But but for me, no bullshit. It's just standing up for ideals, striking out against injustice.
Oh, so you're Superman. I'm here to strike out against injustice. Wow, great. Run on that. By all means. If this is the Democratic nominee, people fear him. I think it's a cakewalk. He is so effing phony, it's not even a joke. Anyway, this is Joe Concha. We have jokes on here and everything on Concha at Night. Back with so much more in just a moment.
Where liberalism is a no-go. The Joe Concha Show, weekday edition. Sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation.
The Tunnel to Towers Foundation honors the sacrifices of America's heroes. Heroes like U.S. Army Specialist Andy Keith Kingsley. Andy was part of the 82nd Airborne Division. He received various awards and decorations, including a Purple Heart. While deployed, Andy was catastrophically injured in combat. Andy and his family received a mortgage-free smart home from Tunnel to Towers. But many more heroes, like Andy, need your support. Donate $11 a month and amplify your impact by donating your car or land. Go to T2T.org.
This is the Joe Concha Show, weekday edition, sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Here's Joe Concha.
All right, let's do this. So, in my past life, I actually was a sports reporter, sports columnist, sports producer. New York One, if you're listening in New York City, New York One's still around. It's awesome. That was my first job, basically, in journalism, broadcasting, whatever you want to call it. And working in sports, I always found that the people that I work with were not political. Like, they cared about sports, right? They didn't really talk about left or right or all these cultural issues. They just, did the sports thing. Now, then again, this was around the time when Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick were the co-anchors of SportsCenter, which back in that day, let's call it 1996, 97, 98, big deal. Because you couldn't get your sports scores or your highlights on your phone. There were no phones. So you watched SportsCenter. I did religiously. Or CNN Sports Tonight. Didn't matter. I videotaped it. Or what do you want to call it? VCR. Thank you. It's been that long. I VCR'd it. And then after I got home from football practice or whatever practice, then I would watch it literally like the next day just to get caught up on what was going on, which was cool. Now you get every highlight on your phone like 5 seconds after it happens. But the reason why I bring up SportsCenter is because that Keith Olbermann was a co-anchor of SportsCenter. And I never thought once that Keith Olbermann is a lunatic, but sure enough, he's proven to be like as far left as it possibly comes. And this is what has been exposed about sports media in the social media age, because now we have Jemele Hill who was also a SportsCenter anchor not too long ago. And now, after ESPN fired her, she is this person that goes on social media and obviously says things that shows that she is as far left as AOC times 10. This is cut number 15, and this is Jemele Hill mocking middle America because, God forbid, they're for secure borders. Cut 15, go.
A lot of y'all voted for what you voted for
y'all.
Because of who they were keeping out the country. Some of y'all don't want the country to look a certain way.
You don't talk that. You don't.
Some of y'all think this country is getting a little too brown, a little too dark for your taste. And so you voted to deport and to terrorize certain members of the community because you don't want the community of America to look a certain way.
Oh, it's weird. When she did SportsCenter, she didn't have that accent. It's that whole Crockett, Hillary, AOC thing where suddenly you're talking differently to, I guess, to conform and to be liked by a certain audience. That's not weird. It's contrived and it's pathetic, but that's Jemele Hill. Now, meanwhile, James Woods, Jimmy Woods, as I call him, because when you know James Woods, you call him Jimmy. One of the great actors, I think, of all time. Not prominent actor, certainly, but this guy owns every scene of every movie that he's in. And now, unfortunately, he's been ostracized by Hollywood because, well, he supports Trump. And here he is explaining how he was a Democrat until the trans issue pushed him in another direction. Cut number 16, go.
This was the Rubicon for me with Democrats. If you're still a Democrat and you support mutilating 5-year-olds because they like the color pink, you're just a monster. Shut up. I'm just
agree.
Done with Democrats. If you're still a Democrat now, you're nuts.
And that's that. And this is a guy, Hollywood, lives in Beverly Hills, worth a lot of money, and sees what's going on and says, no more. And I wonder, I think it's more like 50% of actors, actresses, those in Hollywood probably feel the same way James Woods does, but you've got to act. You got to earn. And therefore, you're not going to say what he is at this point because he's in the FU stage of his life where he's not going to get that big co-starring deal with Sly Stallone like he did in, what was that movie again? Oh, boy, Sharon Stone, and they were bomb makers, right? Oh, boy, this is going to kill me. But because I have social media, I can look this up real quick. And the answer is The Specialist, of course, 1994. Excellent movie, but Stallone's good, and Sharon Stone is like Basic Instinct Sharon Stone, but James Wood owns the movie, no question about it. Anyway, this is Joe Concha. This is Concha at Night. Back with so much more, including Julian Epstein, Democratic strategist who's actually sane, in just a moment.
It's the Joe Concha Show, weekday edition.
Joe Concha.
Sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Here's Joe Concha.
Let's bring in our first VIP guest. That is Julian Epstein, Democratic consultant. And Julian, let me ask you, as far as what we're seeing in Texas, Beto O'Rourke ran there for the Senate, for the governorship, also ran for president. He is 0 for 3. And now people are comparing the current person that is running for the Senate, who is James Talarico, of course, defeated Jasmine Crockett by about 4 or 5 points last night, and therefore will be taking on either Cornyn or taking on Paxton as far on the Republican side, that's going to go to a runoff. Now, all of that said, does he have a shot here, or are we seeing another replay of Beto O'Rourke in Texas?
Joe, thanks for having me on. I think this is just a reprise of what the Democrats have done the last 10 years in Texas, which is they have these candidates. There have been a few of them. Beto O'Rourke has been one. They sort of, people get very euphoric about it and think that this is finally going to be the nirvana for the Democrats to turn the red state purple. I don't think there's any chance. Tallarico initially ran as a moderate. He's quickly felt the pressure of the activist extremist left and moved that way. He moved to what I think is an open borders position. He's sort of all on this critical gender theory with his remarks about God being non-binary and sort of all this other crazy stuff. And I think what has happened is what's happening to the Democratic Party at large, which is they submit to the extremist left, which is becoming more extreme all the time, the activist left, on all of the cultural issues and the economic issues. Culture is it's all identity politics, economic, it's all the welfare state. And I just don't think that sells in Texas.
Well, as we've seen in the past, certainly we're talking to Julian Epstein, Democratic consultant. Let's play a clip here, if you don't mind, Julian, as far as James Tallarico during his acceptance speech on Tuesday saying that, okay, everybody's going to call me a radical leftist. But then here's a compilation of the things that he's said, and it's really hard to run from, because these are things that are on video, on social media, and it's not a sources said thing. He actually said this stuff. This is cut number 9. Cut number 9, go.
They're going to throw everything they have at us. They're going to call me a radical leftist.
Our trans community needs abortion care too.
God is non-binary.
Modern science obviously recognizes that there are many more than 2 biological sexes. In fact, there are 6.
Prison is violence. It's hard to imagine a world without prison. Just because it's hard to imagine doesn't mean you shouldn't.
So if you just unpack that, Julian, abortion care for transgenders, God is binary, and then there are actually not 2, but 6 sexes. This is woke liberalism times 20, yet this is what Democrats have put up in Texas. And he is seen, at least by the media, some outlets anyway, as the more moderate choice. Now, I get who Jasmine Crockett is, but at the same time, if you're consulting this, how do you get away from this?
I think this is the dilemma for the Democratic Party. They keep this same playbook. The far left extreme wing that has crazy ideas on gender, on race, on open borders, you name it. It has gone to full scale socialism, and that's what candidates and many elected officials, once they're actually elected, that's the group that they feel they need to cater to. This is probably a group of voters that represent somewhere between 6 and 10% of the party. And in the internet age, they have outsized influence in terms of raising funds, organizing around campaign times, and sort of, likes and sharing social media content. And so the reward system for Democrats, particularly running in primaries, has moved very, very far left. If you look at the politics of polarization in this country, Joe, almost all of the polarization, there's been a fair amount of academic study that's been done on this, is because the Democrats have moved so far left. The Republicans haven't changed much in the last 30 years. They may have even gone a little bit left on abortion, and they may have gone a little bit left on trade. But for the most part, the Republicans have stayed the same. If you do a Venn diagram between President Clinton and President Trump, their positions, you would find remarkable similarity on everything from government spending, welfare, crime, immigration, affirmative action, you name it. Clinton and Trump are actually pretty close on policy. Most of the polarization has come because the Democratic Party has decided to get into these sort of crazy theories on a variety of social issues, whether it's open borders or critical gender, that the public doesn't agree with. And that's why the Democratic Party is euphoric right now, because they think Trump's numbers have dropped after Minnesota. That's true, they've dropped a little bit. But the Democratic numbers are horrible. The Democratic approval is in the low 30s. Maybe only 1 in 4 Americans identify with the Democratic Party anymore. The approval of congressional Democrats is in the teens. So while Trump's numbers have dropped a little bit, the Democrats are far lower. And the reason that they're far lower is because they are way to the left with their ideological rigidity on all these issues, way to the left of the median voter. So I just don't think, things look very good for the Democrats going into the future, notwithstanding the fact that they may do well in the House on the midterms, which is, the bar for that is very low. People get fatigued with the incumbent president. And so we know that historically is true, and we know that it's currently true. That does not mean the Democratic Party has corrected the ship and has moved to where the voters are. It still thinks that the voters are dumb, the voters are wrong, and they're going to impose these social and cultural ideas on an unwilling public by just trying to jam it down their throats, and it's not going to work.
We're talking to Julian Epstein, and you're right about that. The bar is very low because you're talking about almost zero majority on the Republican side. In other words, you don't have to have a great night. You have to win back something like 5-6 seats, and then suddenly Hakeem Jeffries is the House Speaker in the majority. You brought up Bill Clinton as far as him being, a moderate, and he was, I think, in terms of, especially after he took a beating, obviously, in the House race in 1994, and he could have done two things. He could have gone way to the left or work with a guy like Newt Gingrich and pass welfare reform and pass things like a balanced budget amendment and say the era of big government is over. In other words, Bill Clinton, as you said, in terms of especially crime and deportations, illegal immigration, sounds just like Donald Trump if you play back the tapes. I guess my question is, because that was pre-cable news and that was pre-social media, that I think has more of an influence on Democratic lawmakers and lawmakers in general, also Republicans as well. I think that in the end, when you get instant feedback from your hardcore base, suddenly you're not as, brave to go towards the middle, because the people that want to hear what they want to hear don't want to hear about the fact that you want to compromise. You think social media and cable news in general has had a big influence on the way we govern now?
I think it's had a huge influence. I think it's having a huge influence on everything. It's having a huge influence on young people. It's having a huge influence on mental disorders. It's having a huge influence on the decline in education. It's having a huge influence on on our politics. The reward system and social media, we've known this since 2012. Facebook discovered this. What keeps people on social media is anger. And the way that translates into politics, Joe, is that it drives both parties to be contemptuous of the other party. You get rewarded on social media in terms of your followers, your likes, and fundraising, which social media is used for, by showing maximum contempt for the other side. That's what turns people on. They get a dopamine rush of anger. And that is what our system is about right now. Our politics, ushered by social media, has become a politics of anger and contempt. And it's occurring on both sides. Fortunately for the GOP, they've had the sense to remain in the political center where the median voter is. On the Democrats, they have this notion that what they have to do is erase hierarchies that are oppressive. That's their ideological bent. That means destroying the free market as we know it through regulation. That means eliminating a colorblind society that Martin Luther King envisioned in favor of race preferences for in-groups and race discrimination against out-groups. It means these crazy gender critical gender ideologies. It means open borders and universalism, which is a favorite of the socialist left. It's all driven towards the extremes, and the extremes of the Democratic Party is basically socialist ideology, which is a deconstructionist ideology, deconstructionist about the West under the theory that the West is oppressive. The West has lifted more of humanity, both through economic mobility and wealth and prosperity and individual liberty. It has uplifted humanity more so than any civilization in the history of humankind. And every country that has followed the principles of the West, open and transparent government, free markets, private property, has prospered. Every government, every country that has not followed it has remained poor. I mean, look at former colonies, for example. It's a favorite subject of the socialist left. You know, South Korea was a colony of Japan. South Korea is now an enormously prosperous country because they've followed the principles of the West. Same with Singapore. Singapore was a former colony as well. Singapore was emancipated in the 1960s. They're an enormously prosperous country because they followed the principles of the West. Look at Ethiopia. Ethiopia was never a colony, but Ethiopia has remained poor, mostly because it has not been able to break out of tribalism. It has not been able to create a free market system and a transparent government, and that's why it's remained poor. So what the West has done, not just for itself, but for the rest of the world, it has set a framework that is the most emancipatory, the most upwardly mobile, the most protective of individual liberty that any civilization has ever seen. But socialists can't stand this. Socialists can't have that, because the socialists and the Democratic Party would admit this, they would be out of business. They would have no way to organize a movement, no way to raise money, no way to do what they do. They would be out of a movement. So they have to come up with these bizarre theories that the Western civilization is somehow oppressive. Thank God the American people, for the most part, think it's a bunch of malarkey, which is, again, why the socialist left represents about maybe 6% of voters, but it has an outsized influence, and particularly in the primary process, with Democrats, and Democrats are scared to death of them.
Especially on social media, to your point. We're talking to the voice of sanity, a Democratic consultant, Julian Epstein. All right, Julian, you're a pro. All right, I'm going to hold you to this because we're up against a hard break. You have 30 seconds here, 30 seconds. The top 4 right now, Democratic nominees for the 2028 nomination, all right, for president: Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Pete Buttigieg. Does any one of those 4 come out of this, or are we missing somebody?
No, I don't think any of the 4 come out of that. I think they are all deeply flawed candidates that would not have an appeal in a general election. And I think what the Democrats have to do is look elsewhere, perhaps to a Josh Shapiro, although Josh Shapiro has showed signs of buckling to the progressive left. I would like to see somebody like a Jamie Dimon. I don't know what party he belongs to, but
JPMorgan.
That's who I think. Yes, that's who I think the Democrats need. I think the Democrats need somebody who is sane on cultural issues and who knows how to build. Right? Bill Clinton's phrase was a bridge to the 21st century. The Democrats right now don't know anything about building because most of the Democratic officials have never been in private practice, and they're not good at building. What they're good at doing is grievance and building the welfare state. And that's not what the public wants. What the public wants is a candidate who can build into the future. We have a lot of uncertainties going into the AI future with all the labor displacements that are going to occur. They want somebody who can tackle that problem and provide a roadmap for the future, who can lower healthcare costs by bringing in more competition. The regulatory framework of Obamacare has been a failure. Regulating housing is also a failure. The only way we're going to get lower housing is by producing more of it. The only way we're going to produce more of it is through deregulation. Somebody that can speak common sense like Jamie Dimon is, I think, the ticket to getting the Democrats back into a place where they're viable, particularly after 2030 when we have a census where they're going to lose electoral votes and a lot of House seats. The current glide path right now for the Democrats is not good.
Jamie Dimon. All right, we're saving this tape right here because that makes a lot of sense, actually. Thank you, Julian Epstein. And this is Concha at Night. Appreciate it, Julian. We'll have you back, okay?
All right, Joe. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you. And this is Concha at Night, as I just said. And wow, we're going to have so much more fun as we wrap this puppy up in just a moment.
This is the Joe Concha Show, weekday edition.
Joe Concha.
Sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. This is the Joe Concha Show, weekday edition, sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Here's Joe Concha.
All right, so Kamala Harris had actually endorsed Jasmine Crockett for that Texas Senate seat, or at least winning the nomination, and obviously Jasmine fell well short. How about President Trump? How does he do in terms of endorsements when he injects himself into a primary? Well, CNN's Harry Enton gives us the results. This is cut number 12. Go.
Two Republican primaries. He is a Tom Brady. He is a Babe Ruth, because take a look here. Times Trump endorses won GOP primaries, congressional and gubernatorial races, 98% in 2020, 95% in 2022, and then 96% in 2024. Now, I will note that oftentimes he endorses incumbents, and those folks don't necessarily have very hard challenges. But even when he endorses challengers against incumbents, the challengers win a majority of the time. His endorsement, President Trump's endorsement, is as good as gold in Republican primaries.
You compare it to Tom Brady. He actually does better than Tom Brady lost.
He did
a few Super Bowls, stunningly.
Yeah.
Donald Trump almost never loses when he endorses in a primary.
I mean, there you go. He's the Tom Brady of endorsements in primaries. And if he endorses Ken Paxton against James Tallarico, well, good night and good luck. I mean, not that it matters. I think, obviously, Paxton, who will be the nominee, wins anyway. But with Trump's backing, end-o match. Anyway, let's talk about Adam Schiff, shall we? Because here he is on MS Now. This is amazing. No, it's not amazing to me. It's the wrong word. It is just the hubris of this guy to talk about how wars are really expensive. Therefore, we shouldn't go to war with Iran because we have to think about the American taxpayer, and we shouldn't spend money on wars indefinitely. The same guy who over and over and over again with Ukraine backed Biden spending whatever the hell he wanted in fighting that war, endless war in perpetuity. Anyway, here's Adam Schiff on, of course, MSNBC, talking about the cost of war. Yeah, Adam, go. Cut 19.
We're blowing up the opportunity to invest in our own people, in our own country, in our healthcare system, and bringing down the cost of living. There's no free lunch here. There's a real financial cost to all of this.
Now, the good news is for Schiff is that when you go on MSNBC with Chris Hayes, he won't bring up the fact that, hey, you supported far more money for Ukraine and Russia in that war. So why is this different? Any reasonable fifth grade journalist would ask that question there. But of course, that doesn't happen because it's MSNBC. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan, guys that are on the radio, Joes in general, are awesome. All right. We're talking Joe Rogan, Joes in general. Joe Torre, Joe Piscopo, Joe Pesci. I'll go down the lines. DiMaggio, Concha, Rogan. Here he is talking about how, let's look at the stats between ICE violence and trans shooters. And what are you going to come up with here? Rogan, here's why he's number one. Cut number 6, go.
Do you know who's killed more people than ICE this year? Mm-hmm. Trans shooters. Do you know the majority of these high school shootings have been transgender people?
I did not know that.
Yeah. How many of them? There was one recently, and yeah, it's a lot of them. You know why? Because they're giving them psych medications, they're giving them a bunch of crazy hormones, and a lot of them probably have mental struggles already, and they're ostracized from society, and fill in the blank, and then they're empowered by thinking that the world has done something bad to them.
Precisely. Thank you, Joe Rogan, and thank you for listening tonight. This has been Concha at Night. We're back tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, here in New York on WABC and on stations around the country. Until then, 2 words for you. Bye-bye.
The Tunnel to Towers Foundation honors the sacrifices of America's heroes. Heroes like U.S. Army Specialist Andy Keith Kingsley. Andy was part of the 82nd Airborne Division. He received various awards and decorations, including a Purple Heart. While deployed, Andy was catastrophically injured in combat. Andy and his family received a mortgage-free smart home from Tunnel to Towers. But many more heroes like Andy need your support. Donate $11 a month and amplify your impact by donating your car or land. Go to T2T.org.